Hello, paramours of the art world. This is Cyan, the tiny-handed artist, and today we are going to be doing the ink layer. We're going to be continuing off the last drawing, which was... We really do not have a name for this character, but I will have to come up with one. I was thinking maybe Matilda for them. I have no idea. We will see. um, there are two versions that I will be demonstrating for you. One is the classic liner, which will be on this model over here, and then there will be sketch ink, which is slightly more liberal, a bit more free-spirited, definitely more energetic, which will be on this model right here. This video will be split into two parts that I could dedicate time to each one and also be providing tips along the way. But today we are going to be doing the traditional line art. And my personal weapon of choice is this number over here, this yellow pen, which I am not quite sure what it's called, Ink 3G pen in your Krita. I always mark it under my favorites, but you can find it under ink pens. It's just a little way over here. And this is our weapon of choice for this battle of art. We're going to zoom in a little bit because it makes it a heck of a lot easier. And the easiest place to start is usually the base of the head, this part around here. That part. Now, a tiny suggestion, because it is relatively strong, the rough sketch, what I suggest is bringing down the opacity just a tiny bit so there's contrast. See? That way it's just a little bit different from when you go up back to the ink layer. See how much stronger it is over here? So it's a lot easier to see how you're working on it. My first suggestion is starting out by the head. And I can understand that it's a little bit difficult getting some of these rounder ends, especially when you're drawing traditional art and you're using paper or a notebook. I am aware that notebooks have paper, so it would basically be the same thing. But in those options, you usually get to rotate the paper. There is a solution. I use currently a laptop hooked up to my tablet. It does not have a screen, but I draw directly from a laptop. And what I usually do is on the laptop, here I'm switching to the laptop mouse, I right click on the screen and it shows this little toolbar over here. And you can use this to rotate the image. This circle over here will always mark off kind of where it is center mass, I guess the original orientation of it. And once this loads, it's a little bit slow today, but things happen. In the meantime, I'll be explaining a little bit of what this Docker is, or not. It's an interesting little tool. All you have to do is right click and you can get that Docker back. But I love this rotate part because it takes the place of the paper that you cannot rotate. Especially as a lefty, I find myself rotating the paper all the time. I don't know if it's just a symptom of using what they call the devil's hand. At least back in the day, that's what they called it. I personally just call it the only hand I can possibly draw with. I dare you guys to try and draw with your opposite hand and notice the difference. When you draw with your less dominant hand, there are different ways that it could turn out. Primarily it'll be probably a lot shakier. Unless you're ambidextrous, then you're just immortal, basically. But when you are using your less dominant hand, what happens is you can either get a lot of shakiness, you could not be drawing with as strong strokes. Your art style will definitely be different, I can tell you that. But something I noticed with my art, besides shakiness, I actually usually engrave with my dominant hand, so that shakiness is not a problem. But with my less dominant hand, I always draw incredibly light, barely touching down onto it. It's the weirdest thing. Let's see if I can rotate this bad boy over here. Come on, Matilda, work with me. There we go. Click here for to get it back centered. Rotation 0.0. Notice And here we head off to the eyes and the nose. Now then, if you want to ensure that everything is nice and even, just go back to our favorite symmetry tool. We drag it right over here to about the center of the chin, and that's just about the center mass, and you can get nice even eyelash lines. I always get my eyelash lines uneven in the rough, so that's why I have to find a way to double check. Notice here I was doing some editing and I was just slightly off, but that's kind of what gives art its quirks, you know what I mean? I don't know if you guys have heard, but there's this style that my sister told me about called Twiggy, which is more pronounced lower lashes. And I've been fascinated by it ever since. It's just so unique. I have always seen pronounced upper lash lines. I hate drawing lashes individually like this. I like drawing more of a straight edge, as if there's a wing liner. There we go. Twiggy was actually a model. I believe a British model. I'm not quite sure where specifically she was from, but she was one of the most fascinating people I've seen. I recommend you Google her. I will put in the description below all her info, but she is a very captivating person. I'm severely tempted to be drawing her, and I might do that in one of the next videos. I might just draw Twiggy. I mean, that lash line, although I did notice that they accentuated her already long lower lash line with a little bit of makeup, because it looks like it's separated into wedges, but if you look closely, you can see just a touch of eyeshadow added, just like you would mascara to the top lash line. She added to the bottom lash line. You know, you can add a little bit of eye bags over here for details. Usually if you want the more dark purple pronounced eye bags, you will add the accentuation more over here, a little more angled downward, because this is where usually the purple color will be positioned, right around here. We're going to leave a nice little guideline. It's barely visible, but if you look a little closer, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. There's a tiny little guideline for where I'm going to put a little bit of purple under the eyes, just for to give it more of a natural look, because not all of us are as well rested as we seem. One of the beauties of foundation, or just a good night's sleep. I don't know. I'm particularly a night owl myself, so that cannot be changed. I just love drawing at night because it's more fun. Here you're going to highlight a good bit the nose bridge. Now you might be thinking there's a lot missing over here, but something I used to do in older drawings was draw out the nose over here, and what it did was make the face look very boxy, very geometric, not very naturalistic. So what I suggest is, in the rough sketch, you can do underneath some guidelines for where you want the shadows to be, just like I did the chin shadow over here. But in the ink layer, at least, I do not recommend, at least with traditional ink art, I do not recommend highlighting the bones here. Now, I have seen a lot of artists that I do admire. I do not quite remember their names, but they will accentuate certain shadows in the ink layer, and I find it fascinating. I mostly mean this with people that share my style in particular, which would be, I want to know how to categorize my style. It just kind of is. I would love to see you all putting this into practice and see what you come up with. I always love seeing people's interpretation of things. It's the reason why art history was my absolute favorite course, because there was always a different interpretation you can get from anything. And I realize now I never rough sketched her eyebrows, but here's where we can have some fun. Here's a suggestion. Eyebrows are such a fun attribute because they always look just slightly different and they help with the expressiveness of the eyes. Without them, they could look pretty blank, but with them, they're pretty powerful and they can give a pretty intimidating stare. Alright, I'm clicking Control on my computer. Notice how it changes from a plus sign to a negative? I should teach you guys the hotkeys. When you click Control on the little magnifying glass, it allows you to zoom out. Leave it as is and you zoom in. We're only missing a tiny bit here, and we're going to move on to the neck and the collarbone. This part I'm not quite sure what it's called. Comment below if you know what this is called. I just call it that kind of stringy thingy that comes down from the neck. That's the maximum of my vocabulary at times. Then over here, we're just going down a little bit. You click E on the computer, and that is the shortcut for the eraser. That way you don't have to go all the way up here, click it, and then all the way down here, erase. Control Z is for to undo. But with Krita, I noticed, and I had to change this in the settings over here. I will do a tutorial of what I know about Krita so that you all can get to drawing on here because it's a fascinating program. I'm currently contorting in order for to get the shoulder lines right. But if you get a couple lines out of the way, that's all right. It just gives it a nice, I would say, organic line. You might even call it organic to the inorganic, since computers are not exactly organic creatures. But man, can they make marvelous creations. Here we go. We're missing the final side of the shoulders and traps. And then we will hit this collarbone over here. Matilda over here is starting to look slightly muscular. On accident, really. There we go. Going up to the collarbone. And you don't even have to click Control, you just click the E key and it changes it. Sometimes I will highlight this part. Occasionally. It will be much more pronounced if it were in the sketch version. But really, there you have it. This is how you ink with traditional line art if you remove the rough layer underneath, which would be this one. Look how clean that looks. This, under this layer, is what you are going to be adding the colors that will bring this baby to life. That makes part 1 of the inking stage of drawings. I hope you like this video. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, like it. I will be pleased to see what you all say. And hope you all have a wonderful day. Have fun. Enjoy. And I loved drawing for you all.